spies operating behind enemy lines, engaging in wartime sabotage and resistance, and espionage and clandestine operations. These were all part of the job description for the O.S.S., the Office of Strategic Services. The O.S.S. was the United States wartime intelligence agency that put its agents behind enemy lines to work with and trained resistance fighters to carry out sabotage, guerrilla warfare, and covert operations. Already, I'm sure you can sense the dramatic possibilities. And in 1945, all of the major studios were in a race to see who could produce and release the first film about the O.S.S. Paramount even had under contract an actor who served with distinction as an O.S.S. officer in Italy and the Balkans, Sterling Hayden. And naturally, they wanted him to star in the movie, thinking that Hayden's wartime record would add to the film's authenticity and box office appeal. Only Hayden was still in uniform and on active duty and wouldn't be discharged in time for Paramount to get their planned film out first. Because also headed into production around the same time were 20th Century Fox's 13 Rue Madeleine, starring James Cagney and Richard Conte, and Warner Brothers' Cloak and Dagger, starring Gary Cooper and Lily Palmer. All of these films were going to introduce the public to the United States wartime covert operations. So instead of waiting for Hayden, Paramount turned to one of their guaranteed box office winners, Alan Ladd. His co-stars included Geraldine Fitzgerald, Richard Benedict, John Hoyt, and Gloria Saunders, and filming began on February 5th, 1946. And let's just say director Irving Pitchell totally understood the assignment because he completed the film's production by late March. The film premiered in New York City on May 31st, beating Fritz Lang's Cloak and Dagger to the screen by 4 months.
If you had known this story a year ago, your life would have been in peril.
Based on the incredible real-life adventures of men who challenged breathless danger with the odds 17 million to 1 against them.
With Ladd at his fighting romantic best and Geraldine Fitzgerald as his lovely partner in danger.
Although well received at the time of its release and a big box office hit, over the years, O.S.S. has fallen into obscurity, which is unfortunate because it was a groundbreaking film and it remains a significant example of Ladd's natural charisma and acting abilities. It was also a very early important entry in the spy genre in American film that many would be surprised to know had a heavy influence on the later iconic James Bond franchise.
Hold it, old boy. That's quite proper, but a dead giveaway anywhere else in the world. Use the fork in the left hand. Only Americans hold it in their right. That's better.
Written and produced by Richard Maibaum, O.S.S. tells the story of Team Applejack, a group of Americans dropped into occupied France with orders to gather intelligence and commit acts of sabotage. The team is made up of
Leader, Rodney Parrish, Army officer, World War I. Masson, Lieutenant J.G., U.S. Navy, civilian occupation, publicity man. Boucher, hockey player, calls himself Brenet. How about a woman? They can go a lot of places and do a lot of things a man can't.
My name is Hélène Dupré. My home is in Rouen. I'm a sculptress.
Once in France, they immediately find themselves in trouble. But they eventually meet up with the French resistance and successfully blend in with the locals.
Please go on, Madame Dupré.
The new trend is therefore actually a very old one.
With D-Day just around the corner, their main mission is to destroy a tunnel vital to the German army.
If we knock it out, we can paralyze traffic on the most important line into Normandy.
To achieve this, Ellen cozies up to a German officer, Colonel Meister, who happens to also enjoy sketching.
I did this one in Rotterdam.
Ellen knows Meister's attracted to her, and she uses this to her advantage to get a ride on a train that will be traveling directly through that tunnel. The team achieves its objective, but because of the betrayal, Colonel Meister is out for revenge, and Team Applejack goes on the run until they can be extracted from France. In the meantime, they continue their espionage work, even making a deal to pay off a corrupt Gestapo bureaucrat in exchange for information. But Colonel Meister is never too far behind. Now, if you're a fan of James Bond, you may be familiar with the name of the screenwriter and producer of O.S.S., Richard Maibaum. He was also the screenwriter on 13 Bond films, beginning with the very first entry, 1962's Dr. No. Now, I'm a casual Bond fan. I enjoy the films, but I would never enter a Bond pub trivia contest. Even I can see the obvious influence of O.S.S. on Maibaum's later Bond screenplays.
Plastic explosive that looks, feels, and tastes like modeling clay.
For an in-depth look at the Bond O.S.S. connection, I've linked a fantastic video by Damn Fool, Idealistic Crusader in the description. He knows his Bond, and he draws the straight lines from O.S.S. to James Bond.
James Bond.
Maibaum, through contacts made while he was in the Army, was the one able to secure the cooperation of the O.S.S. for the film. From the hundreds of O.S.S. incidents, Maibaum took 3 typical adventures and wove them into a screen story. There had been previous American-made spy stories. Hitchcock's Foreign Correspondent and Saboteur are probably the most well-known and best remembered, but films like Manhunt, Once Upon a Honeymoon, and Above Suspicion are about average people, not specifically trained for any covert missions, asked to carry out some kind of spy work, and those films don't reveal the inner workings of official intelligence agencies. O.S.S. offered audiences a glimpse into the secret operations that took place behind enemy lines. In the end, Paramount's film was not only first, it was a huge hit. But in 1946, Alan Ladd was a hitmaker. After working for years as a studio grip, then in a series of low-budget B-movies, and even a soundie, I mean, guys, he's got a lovely singing voice.
I look at you and the drum begins to beat.
His breakthrough role came in 1942 with the film This Gun for Hire, in which he played the complex and brooding hitman character named Raven. The film was a critical and commercial success, and Ladd's portrayal received praise for his intensity and screen presence. This role helped establish him as a rising star in Hollywood. Ladd's ability to convey emotions with subtlety and restraint became a defining characteristic of his acting style.
I'm not going to hurt you. You treated me okay.
Moreover, he had a slender build and a slightly boyish face, and that created a wonderful contrast with the toughness and darkness of his character.
He was very shy, very sweet, and he was a gentleman. He really had a lot of sensitivity. I don't think he knew it himself, but he really did. Even though he was the mean or the tough or the whatever, he was sensitive, and there was a great gentleness about him.
In the 1940s and 50s, magazine audience polls consistently ranked him as a top Hollywood star. For a little over 10 years, Ladd appeared almost monthly in movie magazine stories that highlighted his films, his seemingly picture-perfect marriage to Sue Carroll, and his leisure activities. Publicity fluff pieces visited the Ladds at their new home or at their ranch. He even had his own comic book.
Box 13, with the star of Paramount Pictures, Alan Ladd, as Dan Holliday.
His 4 pairings with screen partner and icon Veronica Lake further cemented his place in popular culture. Ladd's brooding intensity and Lake's cool delivery and captivating beauty and allure made them one of the era's most bankable romantic pairings.
You've never seen me before tonight.
Every guy's seen you before, somewhere. The trick is to find you.
But he was an unconventional leading man. In an industry populated by dark-haired dreamboats, he was a lean and chiseled blonde. Standing at a little over 5 feet 7 inches, he was on the shorter side, but he was taller than James Cagney and comparable in height to John Garfield and Humphrey Bogart, so he wasn't alone in that aspect. But where Garfield was able to laugh at having to stand on an apple crate, Ladd's extreme personal insecurities over his height would make it a sore spot for him for most of his career. But Ladd was full of insecurities. He was insecure about his talent. He legitimately believed he didn't have any. He also had the added burden of being extremely sensitive and believing his critics. In fact, the critics were often quite harsh. Paramount was home to Preston Sturges, Billy Wilder, and Cecil B. DeMille, but Ladd, one of the studio's biggest stars, never worked with any of them. He told O.S.S. co-star Geraldine Fitzgerald more than once, "I can't really act." Fitzgerald would later tell Ladd biographer Beverly Linnett that, in fact, Ladd was one of the finer actors she'd ever worked with, and that he must have believed the press he received. Fitzgerald personally told Ladd, "You're a wonderful actor. Just try to get yourself a director that understands you." She would go on to say, Ladd needed to get with an actor's director who understands the problems that some actors have. Then he could have learned that he had real skill. He didn't know that. If he had a director who was very warm to him, that would have supplied him with the confidence he needed, and when Shane came out, I thought he had. I was so happy for him, and I was hoping there would be a continuity to that. But he wasn't always able to work with George Stevens.
Shane, who attracted the woman with his quiet strength, who fascinated the boy with the glint of his gun.
He would continue to make crowd-pleasing but critically panned films for the rest of his career, and many of them, including O.S.S., would slide into obscurity.
And out of the 20s and all they were came Jay Gatsby, who built a dark empire for himself because he carried a dream in his heart.
For modern viewers, O.S.S. provides a glimpse into the espionage genre of the 1940s. For those interested in tracing the origins of spy movies, O.S.S. is a noteworthy precursor, showcasing the themes and tropes that would later become the hallmarks of the genre. For Alan Ladd fans old and new, it's a showcase of his talents beyond Shane, and puts on display the elements that made him one of the biggest stars of his time, and supports the enduring legacy of his cool charisma. There are 8 million stories in the cinema cities. This has been one.
We're attached to an outfit called O.S.S., you know, the old O.S.S. They made pictures about it. I think they made a picture with Alan Ladd called O.S.S. or some damn thing.